So it turns out voters aren't so hot on the Trump economy the second time around. Just 3 months into Trump's term, more and more Americans are getting worried about higher prices. A new University of Michigan consumer sentiment survey finds growing concern about the impact of the Trump tariffs. The president's trade whiplash is rattling the stock market and damaging the U.S. dollar. This week, the International Monetary Fund warned the Trump tariffs will slow global economic growth. Another group of international economists fear the U.S. could see a recession this year. If things go south, the Wall Street Journal reports, quote, economists said the downturn would be self-inflicted, calling it a more manufactured deceleration, rather than resulting from an external shock like the 2008 financial crisis or the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. Joining us now, Bharat Ramamurthy. He served as Deputy Director of the National Economic Council during the Biden administration when, they knew what they were doing.
Right. Bharat, so let's just jump right to the bottom line here. This is all messed up for everybody, right?
Yeah, I think that's the way of putting it.
This is not how. I don't care what you think about the Biden administration. I don't care what your politics are. The economy in January was stable, stabilizing even more, beginning to level up areas of the economy that still needed some strengthening. The infrastructure work, the efforts around getting prices down, the efforts around getting interest rates down, all of that was working. This Tuesday, the Washington Post talking about the IMF tariff impact. As 2025 began, the U.S. had been expected to outpace other advanced economies as it had for several years. The Federal Reserve was within reach of choreographing a soft landing, bringing inflation under control without recession. That's what I was just referring to. The president's tariff campaign upended that outlook. With tariffs making foreign products more expensive for American consumers, domestic companies will face less competition and less pressure to innovate. Across the U.S. economy, productivity will drop and prices will rise, the fund says. That's the new reality. What are we talking about here? Why are people walking around pretending that somehow all of this stuff is magically going to work when the empirical evidence in front of us, and that's just the mom and pops out here starting to scream, tells us otherwise?
Yeah, I don't think that there's good reason to be optimistic about any of this. Look, if you see what the impact of the tariffs has been, the claim is that this is about helping bring production back to the United States, more manufacturing in the United States, right? All these other harms that we're dealing with, higher costs for consumers, all the uncertainty, it's about manufacturing. But if you look, there's a lot of survey data out there of manufacturers. The regional Federal Reserve banks do surveys of manufacturers in their districts. And in recent weeks, we've seen the Dallas Fed, the Richmond Fed, other regional Federal Reserves survey manufacturers in their district. And what do we see? They're the hardest hit by all of these. Why is that? There's two reasons for that. Number one, about 30% of the inputs that American manufacturers use come from abroad. So when you impose a 20, 30, 40% tariff on something that auto part manufacturer in the United States needs, that means that their costs are going to go up and makes U.S. manufacturing less competitive. The second thing is there's so much uncertainty about what the tariff world is going to look like. Literally day to day, week to week, Trump is changing the tariffs. And if you're trying to make a multi-million-dollar investment in new manufacturing in the United States, imagine trying to pencil out whether that's going to work. If one day you're talking about a 30% tariff on something, and the next day it could be a 60% tariff, or it could be a 0% tariff. You just can't figure out, is this going to be worth my money or not? And so all that uncertainty is leading manufacturers to pull back on investment. That means less production in the United States, less job hiring in the United States in the manufacturing sector, something that we saw bounce back in the Biden administration. So it's really, they're ironically the hardest hit by all of this.
Can I just real quick want to dovetail? Could you just as a quick explainer for everybody? All right, so we're all not wallowing in the land of stupid. Help us understand, is there a universe in which I can increase your costs by 30 to 40% as a manufacturer? Costs you then are either going to decide to shut your business down or fire people or pass on to the consumer, in which the economy responds by lowering prices, lowering inflation, and having people with more money in their pocket to spend for products?
Yeah, no, the answer is no. And I'm glad you're getting concrete, because I've heard from some businesses in this situation, it's important to remember how these tariffs work. you have a contract.
Tell us, please.
You have a contract. Let's say you're a small business, medium-sized business. You have a contract to import $500,000 worth of goods from China for something that then you use to make a product you sell in the United States. That contract means that that's going to be delivered in May, let's say. Okay, these tariffs are imposed when those goods cross the border, and all of a sudden you're talking about a 50% increase in tariffs with China. Okay, so you're talking about $250,000 in additional costs on this thing that you're importing. That's a lot when you're talking about $500,000 worth of imports. So what are your options in that situation? You can scramble and try to cancel the contract if you can, but then you can't make the good that you were going to make.
Once it's on the ship, you're stuck.
You're stuck. Or you have to pony up $250,000, which is a lot to just have on hand. And your options are, okay, we got to pull back on spending somewhere else. We got to cut back on payroll, which is something that I can control directly. So I'm going to fire somebody. You're hearing already reports of some of these companies cutting back on payroll in order to absorb these costs. Or you'll say, okay, I'm going to keep everybody on the payroll. I'm going to pay these additional costs. I'm going to assume I'm going to make it up on the back end. What does that mean? Much, much higher prices for what you're trying to sell. So really, no matter which option you're looking at either job losses, higher costs for consumers, or important goods not being sold in the United States that were being sold before, or some combination of the three.
What about in the case of like a restaurant, if you're a restaurant owner, talk about that. Or if I'm a farmer, that what I export is soybeans, or, China was buying a lot of my beef before and now they're not.
Yeah, I mean, some of the most harmful tariffs that I can think of are on agricultural products that we import that we can't even physically produce in the United States, okay? We put a tariff on Madagascar, which produces most of the world's vanilla. A lot of people in the United States, restaurants, bakers, are going to rely on vanilla. We can't grow vanilla in the United States. So when we put a tariff on vanilla from Madagascar, it's not like we're going to stimulate the American vanilla industry. We can't grow enough coffee in the United States to satisfy demand. So we
Puerto
import
Rico
a lot
and
of it
Hawaii can't do it all.
Can't do it all.
We rely on imports from Brazil and Colombia. When you put a tariff on that coffee, what does that mean? We're just raising costs for American consumers to no end, to no strategic purpose, and that's happening all across the board on all sorts of goods.
So there's raising costs, but then there's also what you're hearing from the CEOs of Target, Walmart, who are saying, Mr. President, in 2 weeks, people are going to come into our stores, and the goods are not going to be on the shelves. Can I just ask you, what are you buying right now?
Yeah, I mean, look, I have 3 kids. We rely on a lot of stuff from Walmart and Target, diapers, kids' toys, and one of the most concerning data points that I've seen recently, when we were in the White House, we would track very carefully shipping routes between Asia and the United States, right? A lot of the stuff comes out of ports in China. It comes to the ports of Long Beach and LA on the West Coast. And you can track what are these shipping containers carrying. And we're seeing data that a lot of the ones that are leaving China now are 30-40% empty. In other words, people are, in that scenario I talked about earlier, are canceling these contracts to the extent that they can. And that means these things are not coming in. So yeah, not only are we talking about higher prices, we're potentially talking about shortages of really important goods that we rely on from abroad. And I think as angry as consumers were about a 10% increase in the price of bacon or in eggs,
it's alarming.
It's going to be a lot worse when you can't get baby diapers, formula, and other things that you really need.
And go ahead.
Well, I just want to ask, because the president says he's making all these deals. Okay, he's in this Time interview on Friday saying, I've made all the deals. Time is like, when are you going to announce them, Trump? I've made 200 deals. Time said, you've made 200 deals, Trump, 100%. He also in that interview,
Just want to say there are 193 UN members, so he's rounding up there.
Rounding up, I don't know who the extra 7 are now. And then you've got China on Thursday. This interview came out on Friday. The president has been saying for more than a week and a half that he is negotiating, that they're talking to the People's Republic of China. China on Thursday is contradicting these claims that Beijing and Washington are having conversations. Just how detrimental is the fact that China seems to be on some we can do without here in this conversation? Because that's what they're saying. They're saying we've been here for 5,000 years. We'll be here for 5,000 more.
Yeah, and look, and the other thing is in negotiations, a lot of it comes down to which side can more easily stand to walk away. And what we have seen is that Trump has unilaterally pulled back on a lot of his tariff threats without countries giving him anything. So if I were as a negotiator for Japan or China and sitting across the table from U.S. negotiators, why would I be offering all sorts of concessions when you can put the hammer to Trump and American consumers? You can say, just wait a couple of weeks until all the stuff on the shelves the shelves are empty or things are more expensive. You'll come crying back to us about cutting a deal with us.
And
so
that's
I think
the reality right there. That's the reality right there, because the shelves will be empty. Oh, baby, watch what happens at Christmas time, because this, just real, because I know we got to go, but just real quick. This is a lagging indicator of where we're headed, because what's happening now is not necessarily felt in the price you pay and what's on your shelves right now. Where you'll see that price, that new price, and those empty shelves is July, August, September. Back to school. Y'all know where y'all know where you get your stuff from back to school. Y'all know where that comes from. I'm telling everybody, you don't believe what Barack is saying? Pick up anything in your household and look and see where it's made.
Just want to know.
Just pick it up and see where it's made from.
These cups are made in Thailand. So,
you know, the reality of it is this international market is coming home to roost in a way that's going to be really, really painful for a lot of American businesses and consumers.
2 weeks, just in time for Mother's Day.
I mean, honestly, this is what it looks like when the people who work on the Economic Council and the White House are competent. Barack Ritchie, thank you very much for your time. Good to see you.